If there is no self, who is reborn? Have you ever sat in silence and asked yourself a question that no one else seems to have an answer for? Who am I? Not your job, your name, or the story you tell yourself when you look in the mirror. Not your nationality, your relationships, or your beliefs. No, something deeper than all of that. Who is the one who sees? Who is the one who thinks? Who feels joy and sorrow? Who carries the weight of memory and the longing for something more? That question, so simple, yet so profound, is one most people never truly ask. And if they do, they often brush it aside with a convenient answer. I'm me. But if you dare to linger, if you sit with the silence long enough, if you turn inward not with judgment, but with genuine, tender curiosity, you may find something unexpected, something unsettling, something liberating. You may come to see that the self you've clung to so fiercely isn't what you thought it was. It isn't solid. It isn't permanent. And, perhaps most shocking of all, it isn't even necessary for your existence. The Buddha said this over 2,500 years ago, not as a philosopher, but as one who had pierced through illusion and seen directly into the fabric of experience. There is no self, he declared. Not in the body, not in the thoughts, not in the memories or the cravings. What we call I is just a label slapped onto a process, a river of causes and conditions, ever flowing, never fixed. A dance of sensations, perceptions, reactions. There is no unchanging soul beneath it all. No master behind the curtain. No owner of your breath. Only life unfolding. And yet, that insight leads to one of the deepest and most paradoxical puzzles in all of Buddhist thought. If there is no self, then who is reborn? Who continues after death? Who suffers? Who reaps the fruits of karma? Who awakens to enlightenment? At Buddhist Mindfulness Space, we don't shy away from these questions. We embrace them, because in that apparent contradiction lies the gateway to something rare and precious, true spiritual freedom. Part 1. What you are and why it changes everything. Let's begin not with philosophy, but with observation. What are you? Right now, in this moment. Close your eyes, feel your breath, and look inside. What do you find? According to the Buddha, you are not a singular entity. You are not a soul in a body. You are not a ghost inside the machine. You are a composition, a gathering of 5 changing elements that together create the illusion of a person. These are called the 5 aggregates. First, form. Your body, your skin, bones, and muscles. The 5 senses. Everything you can touch, measure, see, or describe. Second, feeling. Every moment you experience is either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This raw data of sensation colors your world and shapes your reactions. Third, perception. Your mind labels things instantly. Tree, danger, beautiful, mine. It organizes chaos into order. But it's just a mental function, not truth. Fourth, mental formations. These are your thoughts, your habits, your desires. The echoes of your past. The scripts you play out without realizing it. This is where karma is born. Fifth, consciousness. Not a soul, but awareness itself. The light that knows sensation, that perceives, that receives thought. But it is not static. It arises and fades. None of these aggregates is a self. They are like ingredients in a recipe, like instruments in an orchestra. Together, they create the music of you. But take them apart, and you find nothing permanent, nothing separate, nothing that stands on its own. They are like a flame, flickering from one moment to the next. Or like a river, constantly flowing, never the same twice. And yet we cling to them. We say my body, my thoughts, my identity. But there is no owner, no fixed I, only the illusion of one. And that illusion is the root of suffering. Then, who is reborn? If there is no self, how can anything be reborn? This is the heart of the paradox. We are conditioned to think in terms of continuity. We believe a traveler is moving through lifetimes, carrying memories, experiences, and karma. But Buddhism offers a different view, one that is both more precise and more freeing. Rebirth, in Buddhist thought, is not about a soul jumping from one body to another. It's about continuity without identity. A process, not a passenger. Think of it like this. When you light one candle from another, the flame continues. But it's not the same flame. There's no transfer of substance, just continuation of the pattern. Or think of waves on the sea. One wave gives rise to another. Each is shaped by the conditions before it: wind, current, gravity. There's no separate thing moving forward. Just energy. Just form, shaped by cause and effect. This is what rebirth means in Buddhism. Not someone being reborn, but something. And that something is intention. More specifically, craving. Craving is the fuel of rebirth. It's the force that keeps the wheel turning. It's the deep, unconscious thirst to be, to have, to know, to continue. We crave identity. We crave pleasure. We even crave non-existence when life becomes unbearable. But craving is still craving, and craving always leads to becoming. This is how karma functions, not as a cosmic punishment system, but as simple cause and effect. When you act with intention, you plant seeds. Those seeds ripen when the conditions are right. Some immediately, some in days, some lifetimes later. But the process continues, not because a self pushes it forward, but because craving and intention fuel it like fire feeds fire. So who is reborn? No one. And yet, the process continues. The body dies. The aggregates dissolve. But if craving remains, the momentum rolls forward, giving rise to a new configuration of aggregates. A new birth. A new stream of experience. Not a repeat of the past, but a continuation of the conditions. There is no traveler, only the trail. The quiet revolution of understanding what does this mean for you and me, here, now, in this body, in this life? It means everything. Because if what you are is not fixed, then you are not trapped. You are not condemned to repeat the same patterns forever. You are not bound by your past, not bound by your trauma, not bound by your fears. You are a process, not a person. And that process can be shaped. Every moment is a choice. Every breath is a turning point. Every reaction is a fork in the road. If rebirth is happening now, moment by moment, then liberation doesn't begin after death. It begins in this moment, in this choice, in this awareness. To see clearly, to let go, to respond from wisdom, not habit. The Buddha taught that the end of suffering isn't found by escaping the world, but by seeing it as it is. Empty, impermanent, interconnected. Not a place to fear, but a place to wake up. When you stop clinging to a false self, a false future, a false control over things, you don't vanish. You become free. And freedom, in Buddhism, isn't about becoming more. It's about becoming less reactive, less identified, less caught. Until one day, perhaps in this very breath, you experience it, the wheel stops turning. The craving fades. And in that stillness, there is peace deeper than understanding. Not a self to protect, not a soul to save. Just presence, just clarity, just liberation. Part 2. Rebirth is happening now, the truth hidden in plain sight. If you've ever imagined rebirth as something that happens only after death, as a mystical event, or a crossing into some unknown spiritual realm, what you're about to hear may change everything. Because in Buddhist wisdom, rebirth isn't something that happens once. It's not something that happens later. It's not even something that happens far away. Rebirth is happening right now, in this very breath, in this thought, in this exact moment of experience. To understand this, we need to look more deeply at how the Buddha described the nature of reality, not as a static world of things, but as a dynamic flow of events. He taught that every experience, whether it's a sound, a thought, an emotion, or a movement of the body, arises, stays for a fleeting instant, and then disappears. Nothing lasts, not even for a second. In the ancient language of the teachings, this is known as kanakamarana, momentary death. It means that even as you live, you are dying, constantly. Each moment dies into the next. Each sensation dissolves into something new. Each identity collapses into another form. And this constant birth and death doesn't wait for the end of your physical life. It's happening now. In every blink, every breath, every thought. You are being born again and again and again. So when we speak of rebirth, we're not just talking about what happens after the body dies. We're talking about what happens when one thought ends and another begins. When one reaction fades and another takes its place. When the you of 1 second becomes the you of the next, with no stable essence connecting them. That's the deeper meaning of anicca, impermanence. Nothing in your body, mind, or world remains the same even for the duration of a single breath. That's the truth. But we don't see it, because our habits are faster than our awareness. We mistake continuity for identity. We believe that because thoughts are coming fast, there must be a thinker behind them. Because experiences flow, there must be someone experiencing. But that's not how it works. There is awareness. There is a perception. There is a reaction. But there is no owner. Just like a wave on the ocean doesn't own its motion, but is made of it, you don't own your mind. You are its current flow. This isn't abstract. It's observable. Right now, you can hear a sound, a feeling in your body, a judgment in your mind. And if you pay close attention, you'll see each one arise, stay, and vanish. And then what happens? Something new arises. From where? From the conditions. From the karma. From the seeds planted in the previous moment. This is rebirth, not as fantasy, but as the structure of your own experience. The role of karma, planting seeds in the field of the mind. Now, let's return to karma, not as folklore, but as precision. Karma is not fate. It is not divine punishment. It is not the universe getting even. Karma is simply the momentum of intention. Every thought, every word, every action that arises from intention plants a seed. That seed might sprout in the next second. It might blossom in your final breath. Or it may lie dormant for a lifetime, waiting for just the right soil, just the right conditions to break open. This is the mystery of karma. You don't always see its effects immediately, but it never disappears. It shapes how you see the world, how you respond to others, how you interpret pain and pleasure. It conditions your preferences, your reactions, even your fears. It's not stored somewhere in a cosmic vault. It lives in you, here, now, as tendencies, as leanings, as habits. And here's where things get serious. Because if you're not aware of these habits, they drive you. You become a puppet of your past. You react instead of choosing. You grasp instead of letting go. You speak from fear instead of wisdom. You suffer, and you don't know why. But the Buddha offered a way out. He said, awaken. Bring awareness to the moment before you speak, before you react, before you judge. That sliver of space, that pause, is the place where karma can stop. That moment of mindfulness is the seed of liberation. The power of seeing clearly. Why is this so important? Because everything you experience now is shaping what you will experience next. Not just in some far-off future life, but in the next 5 minutes, the next hour, the next emotional state, the next conflict with a loved one, the next moment of peace or pain. This is the law of becoming. You are not a fixed being. You are a process in motion. And that process is constantly evolving according to what you feed it. So if you feed it a craving, the cycle continues. If you feed it anger, the pattern deepens. If you feed it confusion, the fog thickens. But if you feed it clarity, stillness, compassion, then something begins to shift. The storm slows. The noise quiets. And in the silence, a new possibility opens, freedom. This is why mindfulness isn't just a tool for stress relief or emotional regulation. It is the very method of spiritual revolution. It's the microscope through which you can see the machinery of self in motion and decide not to believe in it anymore. It's not easy. The habits are old. The cravings are deep. But you don't have to change it all at once. You just have to see it, one moment at a time. And every moment you see is a moment that breaks the chain. Rebirth without self. The echo and the flame. To return to our original question, who is reborn? Let's answer it fully now. There is no one. And yet, something continues. The echo of past moments. The flame passed from one torch to another. Not the same, not different, just dependent. This is why the Buddha didn't speak of a soul passing from body to body. He spoke of processes, of causes and conditions, of actions and results. Just as an echo depends on a voice, but is not the voice. Just as a shadow depends on a form, but is not the form. Just as the smell of rain carries the memory of the sky, but is not the sky. You are not your past. And yet, your past shapes you. You are not your future. And yet, your choices now shape what's to come. This is the middle path, the razor's edge. There is no self. And yet, what you do matters. Because it is not you who suffers, but suffering still arises. It is not you who continues, but continuation still happens. It is not you who becomes free, but freedom is still possible. The door is open. The Buddha didn't leave us in mystery. He gave a clear path, not one of beliefs, but of observation, of training the mind to see deeply into its nature, of seeing that what we call self is a habit, not a truth. And like all habits, it can be unlearned. Moment by moment, you can loosen the grip, not by force, but by seeing clearly. And what happens when the clinging stops? So does becoming. And when does becoming stop? So does suffering. This is not theory. This is the path. And the first step is now. Part 3. Death is not the end. The moment the stream continues, we've spoken about rebirth not as something distant, but something constant, something woven into the very moment you're experiencing right now. But still, one question remains. If there is no self, and yet the process continues, what happens at death? What happens in that final breath, when the body can no longer hold consciousness, when the brain fades, when the eyes close for the last time? In Buddhist psychology, death is not an end. It is a moment of transition, not for a person, but for a stream of conditions. The final moment of consciousness in this life is called Kudisitta, the death mind. It is shaped, not randomly, but by your strongest karmic tendencies, the thoughts, emotions, and intentions you've repeated most deeply, the grooves you've carved in the field of the mind. This is why how you live matters. Because when death comes, the mind tends to fall toward what is familiar. If your habits are rooted in fear, anger, or craving, those states will dominate the final moments. If your mind is steady, clear, gentle, those qualities will shape what comes next. And what has come next? A new moment of consciousness arises. It's not you who wakes up, but awareness continues. Depending on the karmic momentum from the previous life, a new life is formed. That moment of arising is called Padasandivaya, the linking consciousness. It connects the past to the present, the end to the beginning. But nothing travels. No soul, no entity, just causes and conditions unfolding. It's like one wave rolling into another, one candle lighting the next. The flame continues, not because it jumps, but because the conditions are there. And the new life that arises, whether in a human body, an animal, a celestial realm, or something far harder, is shaped entirely by karma. This isn't superstition. It's not a reward or punishment. It's mechanics. If you plant seeds of hatred, you won't grow compassion. If you cultivate clarity and kindness, you won't awaken in confusion. What happens after death is a mirror of what happens before it. Part 4. Meditation prepares you for dying. And living all of this leads to one conclusion that's as beautiful as it is urgent. The way you live this life is the preparation for your next. And the clearest preparation is the cultivation of mindfulness. Not just sitting in silence, but training the mind to observe reality without distortion. To see impermanence not as a concept, but as direct experience. To loosen the grip of craving, not by willpower, but by understanding. Mindfulness is what prepares you for death. When the final breath comes, and the body grows cold, and the senses retreat, what remains? Awareness. Pure, ungrasping, unattached awareness. If you've trained the mind to recognize thought as thought, feeling as feeling, change as change, then even in the face of death, you are not afraid. Because you understand, nothing is being lost. Only one chapter closing, another opening, until craving stops. Meditation is not just about peace. It's about freedom. It's about learning to die before you die, to release identity, to see through the illusion of self, to rest in what doesn't cling. And if you can let go now, you can let go then. And if you let go then, the wheel of rebirth has nothing to hold on to. No fuel, no fire, just peace. Part 5. The end of becoming. What it means to be free. Let's take this to its conclusion. Let's walk through the door that Buddha pointed to, over and over again, but never pushed anyone through. He said, when craving ends, becoming ends. When becoming ends, suffering ends. This is not nihilism. It's not non-existence. It's not extinction. It is the unbinding of a process that has gone on for lifetimes. It is the cessation of the engine that spins samsara. It is the stillness beyond birth and death. This state, unshaken, unborn, undying, is called nibbana, often mistranslated as nothingness. It is anything but. It is the end of delusion, the end of clinging, the end of the illusion of I and mine. In nibbana, there is awareness, but no distortion. There is clarity, but no self-reference. There is peace, but not as an emotion. Peace is a reality. Stable, unshaken, complete. Can you imagine that? A state where nothing needs to be added, where nothing needs to be defended, where nothing needs to be feared. This is the final freedom. And every moment of your life is either moving you toward it or away from it. Not because of some cosmic plan, but because that's how cause and effect work. You are not separate from the path. You are the path. And the next step is always now. Part 6. So who is reborn? The final answer, so let's ask the question one more time. If there is no self, then who is reborn? And the answer is, no one. And that's exactly why you can be free. Because freedom doesn't require you to save a self. It doesn't require you to escape anything. It only requires you to stop believing in something that was never there to begin with. The suffering you've carried, it came from holding on to a phantom. The fear you felt, it came from thinking you could be lost. But you were never a thing to begin with. You were processing. Flow. A dance of causes and conditions. And when you stop resisting the dance, you begin to dissolve into the rhythm. Not disappear, but awaken. You see the river. You see the fire. You see the wave. And you stop mistaking them for you. And in that moment, something miraculous happens. You are reborn. Not into another body, not into another life, but into truth. Into this breath. This clarity. This stillness. And when that is enough, the cycle has ended. Not because someone escaped, but because there was no one to imprison to begin with. Final words. The invitation: you don't need to wait for death to start seeing clearly. You don't need to believe in reincarnation to benefit from these teachings. You only need the willingness to look inward, honestly, patiently, bravely. Because the answer to who is reborn isn't out there. It's in the space between this thought and the next. The silence beneath your name. The stillness behind your story. And if you look closely enough, you might find that what you thought was you was never there. And what remains? Freedom.